Something has changed around Alexandra Eala, and the WTA is starting to notice. Everywhere Eala goes, the attention seems to follow. Fans are showing up, ticket demand is rising, and tournaments are suddenly facing a very different question. Where can they put Alexandra Eala so the crowd can actually fit? From Washington to Toronto, this has stopped looking like a normal breakout story. It is becoming a phenomenon. And now, the spotlight moves to Cincinnati. After a remarkable stretch of tennis in North America, Eala arrives at the Cincinnati Open with something she did not have at the beginning of the season: a WTA title, a place inside the world's top 20, and a rapidly growing international fan base. But the most fascinating part isn't simply her ranking. It is the reaction around her. In Washington, the excitement surrounding Eala became impossible to ignore. Tournament officials reportedly saw significant ticket interest connected to when Eala would play. Then in Toronto, the demand became even more striking, with reports that the available grandstand capacity was not enough to accommodate the expected interest in her opening match. Think about what that means. This is in Manila. This is in Cebu. This is North America. And a Filipina tennis player is becoming one of the biggest attractions wherever she appears. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Eala isn't generating this attention simply because she is Filipino. She is generating it because the results are now backing up the hype. She has climbed to world number 20, captured the biggest singles title of her career in Washington, and shown that she can compete with some of the most established names in women's tennis. So when Cincinnati officially puts Eala into a field featuring stars like Aryna Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina, Jessica Pegula, Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka, and Iga Swiatek, the question is no longer whether people will watch. The question is how big can Eala Mania become in Ohio? Because Cincinnati may be the next test of whether Alexandra Eala is simply having an incredible summer, or whether women's tennis has discovered its newest global attraction. And that distinction could be enormous. The Cincinnati story begins with a very different Alexandra Eala from the player who arrived on the North American swing as a promising young talent. Now there's expectation, and expectation changes everything. Eala enters Cincinnati after a run that dramatically elevated both her profile and her confidence. The defining moment came in Washington, where she defeated Jessica Pegula in the championship match to claim her first WTA Tour-level singles title. That victory was historic for Philippine tennis, but it was also a statement. Eala did not simply reach the final and take advantage of an easy draw. Her Washington run included victories over established opponents, and the level of competition made the achievement even more significant. Then came Toronto, and this is where the story moved beyond the tennis court. Tournament director Carl Hale spoke about the enormous demand surrounding Eala's opening match, with reports putting interest at more than 5,000 tickets, while the grandstand venue had a capacity of roughly 2,800. That creates an unusual problem for a tournament organizer. When the demand for one player's match appears to exceed the capacity of the court, the player is no longer just another name on the schedule. She becomes an attraction, and the crowds followed. Eala's popularity was clearly becoming part of the tournament conversation, with fans turning up in large numbers and social media amplifying every moment. But there was another reason the attention continued to grow. Eala was winning. That matters enormously. A player can create excitement because of personality, nationality, or a compelling story. But sustained attention in professional tennis usually requires results. Eala was providing those results. Her Washington championship came after she had already built momentum against top-level opposition. And according to the statistics referenced in the news summary, she had recorded 13 WTA-level match wins since the beginning of the grass court swing in June, putting her among the most successful players during that period. That helps explain why the Cincinnati spotlight feels different. The hype isn't floating on its own. There's a competitive foundation underneath it, and Cincinnati organizers appear to understand that. The tournament's own coverage highlighted Eala as a player to watch, describing her as a Philippine trailblazer. Now place that story inside one of the deepest fields of the tournament. Sabalenka, Rybakina, Pegula, Gauff, Andreeva, Osaka, Swiatek, and Eala. Suddenly, the young Filipina isn't entering Cincinnati as an unknown prospect hoping for attention. She is arriving as a top 20 player with a WTA title, and a fan base that is willing to travel. But there is still one question hanging over the entire story. Can Eala turn all of this attention into another major performance on court? Because crowds can create noise, rankings can create expectations, and a breakthrough title can change perception. But Cincinnati will ask the hardest question of all. Can Alexandra Eala do it again against another elite field? This is where Alexandra Eala's Cincinnati story becomes more than a popularity story. Because the biggest danger for any breakout player is the expectation that comes after the breakthrough. Once a player wins a major title, defeats established opponents, and suddenly finds herself inside the top 20, opponents prepare differently. The media watches differently. Fans expect more. And every tournament becomes another opportunity to prove that the previous success was not a one-time moment. For Eala, the challenge is particularly interesting because her rise has combined two things that do not always arrive together: competitive results and genuine star power. The results are easy to understand. She has already captured a WTA Tour-level singles title and climbed into the top 20. Her recent run has also placed her among the players collecting significant match wins during the North American summer. But star power is harder to manufacture. You cannot simply announce it. The fans have to decide. And in Eala's case, the reaction from Washington and Toronto suggests that fans are making that decision very quickly. That Filipino support is obviously a major part of the story. The Philippines has a huge sporting culture, and Eala has become a player capable of connecting tennis with an audience that may not traditionally follow every WTA event. But there is something bigger happening. The attention is expanding beyond Filipino fans. Every victory gives neutral tennis fans another reason to watch. Every major opponent creates another storyline. And every tournament appearance gives Eala another chance to turn casual viewers into regular followers. That's how a tennis star becomes a global attraction. Not overnight, one match at a time. And Cincinnati provides an especially important test because the field is packed with players who know exactly what it feels like to carry enormous expectations. Aryna Sabalenka brings power and championship experience. Coco Gauff represents one of the biggest young stars in American tennis. Iga Swiatek has established herself as one of the defining players of her generation. Naomi Osaka brings global recognition and Grand Slam pedigree. Jessica Pegula is another player Eala has already proven she can challenge. That last point matters. Eala has already shown that she does not need to be intimidated by a famous name across the net. Her Washington run demonstrated that. But Cincinnati will test whether she can reproduce that level against another demanding field and potentially handle the pressure that comes with being one of the players everyone now wants to see. There is also a fascinating psychological element. Before Washington, Eala could enter matches as a rising player with relatively little pressure. Now, she is the player opponents are studying. She is the player fans are waiting for. She is the player tournament organizers are watching closely. And that changes the equation. The spotlight that once helped introduce Alexandra Eala to the tennis world can now become a test of her ability to perform under expectation. That may ultimately be the most important development of all. Because if Eala can continue producing strong tennis while the crowds grow, the headlines get louder, and the expectations become heavier, then Cincinnati could become another step in a much larger transformation. She would no longer simply be the exciting young Filipina everyone is talking about. She would be becoming something much more difficult to ignore. A genuine WTA star. And that brings us to the bigger picture. Cincinnati is not just another stop on Alexandra Eala's schedule. It is another measuring point in a season that has already changed the trajectory of her career. Just months ago, the conversation was about potential. Now, the conversation is about what comes next. That is a massive difference. Eala has already proven that she can win at the WTA Tour level. She has already shown that top-ranked opponents are not untouchable. And she has already created a level of fan interest that has become part of the story itself. But the next stage of her development will be about consistency. One title can create a breakthrough. Repeated performances create a career. That is why Cincinnati matters. The tournament gives Eala another opportunity to compete against elite opposition, handle the pressure surrounding her name, and show that her recent success can become a sustained part of her rise. And regardless of what happens in Ohio, one thing has already become clear. Alexandra Eala is no longer simply representing the Philippines on the international tennis stage. She is helping put Philippine tennis into conversations it has rarely occupied before. The crowds in North America, the growing attention online, the WTA title, and her rise into the top 20 have all combined into something much bigger than a single tournament result. There is momentum now, and momentum in professional sport can be incredibly powerful, but it can also disappear quickly. That's why the next matches matter. Can Eala keep winning when everyone expects her to win? Can she continue challenging established stars? Can she turn the excitement around her into sustained success? Those are the questions Cincinnati will begin to answer. And perhaps the most exciting part is that we still don't know the ceiling. The 21-year-old Filipina has already gone from promising prospect to WTA champion and top 20 player. Now the tennis world is watching to see what happens when Alexandra Eala walks onto the Cincinnati court with thousands of fans waiting for her. The attraction is already there. The attention is already there. Now comes the hardest part, proving, match after match, that she belongs among the names everyone came to watch. And if the summer has taught us anything, it is that Eala's story is moving faster than almost anyone expected. The Eala Mania isn't slowing down. It may only be getting started, asterisk, asterisk.